Hello and welcome to Krackle Comics Weekly. I am Mike, joined alongside by
Daniel.
And Ginger Dan.
And Vince isn't here this week, so thank you for Ginger Dan for stepping in at late notice to help us out this week as we are covering the 1983 miniseries for Green Arrow. It's his first miniseries ever. So it's technically Green Arrow Volume 1, which is kind of crazy that he doesn't have his own book until 1983. Mostly just backup features and then sharing the role with Green Lantern and Green Lantern Green Arrow. But we are going to dive right into that, and that is by Mike W. Barr, who's known for his Batman work, Batman Year 2, and then the Birth of the Demon, OGN. And then we also have Trevor Von Eeden and Dick Giordano on art. So pretty good powerhouse team in 1983 DC here. And with that, I will go right in to the synopsis of the book. It's only 4 issues, and it was a pretty fast read, in my opinion. But I'm going to say this is a pretty underrated, kind of hidden gem for DC, as this has never been recollected, which is kind of crazy. And it ran through May through August of 1983, and this is, like I said, Green Arrow's first time in his own comic book, 4 issues miniseries, and it kind of introduces the running rivalry with Count Vertigo, but we've seen Count Vertigo before, and then Trevor Von Eeden, co-creator of Count Vertigo. The whole series, though, is written like an Agatha Christie mystery. In issue 1, Green Arrow inherits a fortune from his deceased friend, Abby Horton, but soon learns that the money makes him a target for a killer, and also, it's that situation of all of her children didn't get the money. It's Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, who was just her friend. So, all right, what's going on here? Kind of think in modern terms of Knives Out, kind of the same situation. So there's much more kind of nefarious things going on, and she kind of trusted Oliver Queen to snuff out what was going on at her company, because he gets control of that as well. In issue 2, Green Arrow tries to uncover the identity of who's trying to kill Oliver Queen, and it ends with him encountering Count Vertigo with some awesome sequences there. And then issue 3 was probably one of my favorite sequences, with Green Arrow still fighting Count Vertigo as he's putting different fruit on his head and shooting it as each one gets smaller and smaller as he's interrogating him. And that's where he learns why Abby Horton, his friend, was killed and put to death, but he doesn't know the person responsible yet. He just knows why. And then in the 4th one is just basically all entire action. Green Arrow fights Captain Lash on a yacht. Black Canary makes an appearance as he teams up with her, and he learns who the killers were, and it turns out it's Abby's daughter, who made it look like her husband who was the murderer, but she murdered him. And then didn't check to verify that he was dead. He got shot in the temple but didn't kill him. So then he killed her as Green Arrow was standing there kind of in the crossfire in the face-off, and he's like, well, the whole thing's wrapped up. And he just kind of escapes, and he leaves the company in control of the money to Abby's son, who was the only person in the family who wasn't corrupt. But a lot of swashbuckling action in this comic book, and great action sequences and page layouts. We get some cool experimenting with page layouts where we get the jagged action is for deep cut, kind of like diamond quarters of each thing going through slashes across the page. I really love the art in this book, and I will say, go on more about Trevor Von Eeden. He was a prominent Green Arrow artist in the 70s, and Vince giving me his notes, possibly the definitive green artist for the era, and he was actually Frank Miller's first choice for Batman Year 1 before David Mazzucchelli. So that's something very interesting to note, as that book would look very different if it wasn't drawn by David Mazzucchelli. But now I kind of want to see the version that we would have got if it was Trevor Von Eeden. And then I've already talked about Mike W. Barr, but I'm a fan of his Batman stuff. I know Ginger Dan's read Camelot 3000, and that's DC's actually first prestige miniseries right before Watchmen, and that was drawn by Brian Bolland. Camelot 3000, you can collect that now in a very nice deluxe hardcover if you find it available. So that's a kind of a deep cut thing to have. Purely, it's I bought it just on art, but also it's a pretty good story too. But yeah, this is Green Arrow's first miniseries, and it's kind of a huge swashbuckling Agatha Christie murder mystery, and I think it works really well. And it's kind of crazy that this isn't collected, or there isn't a collection of the backup stories previously that were through that. I know there's still a lot of the chunk of Green Lantern, Green Arrow after O'Neill and Adams that isn't collected, which is another crazy thing for a character that's as popular as Green Arrow. But yeah, this was definitely a defining run for him, as it's pretty straight on for the character. Issue 1 even recaps his origin really nicely, and Mike Grell, who would go on to his acclaimed Longbow Hunters miniseries, and after that launched the more kind of grounded and harsher take with the character, where he's set in Seattle and using the just real arrows and like kind of maiming people with them. That happens much later, but yeah, this is the 1983 Green Arrow miniseries, still pre-Crisis. Earth 2 Green Arrow gets killed in Crisis, but no connection here to that series. But yeah, it's very weird that this has never been collected, and I think really works well for an introduction to the character, since you get the origin it's wonderfully drawn by Von Eeden and Giordano in issue 1, even with the whole like leaf costume that he has when he was stuck on the island, and then we would get an origin update years later with Andy Diggle and Jock for Green Arrow Year 1. But even these like 5 pages we get of the origin here are pretty great. But I'll open the panel at this point, and what do you guys think of the 1983 Green Arrow 4-issue miniseries?
I just want to say one thing real quick. When you were summarizing at the end, he gives it to Abby's brother, not his.
Okay, I thought it was the
son. The son dies in issue 2 or 3,
okay,
something like that. But yeah, no, like what you already said, this was a really good miniseries. I've read a fair share of Green Arrow in my day, and I haven't read this mostly because I'm planning to custom bind it into a book with other stuff that has never been collected, and don't feel like reading things before they're in a full book. But this gave me a good excuse, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised with the quality of this book, both writing and art.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who doesn't really have a lot of experience with Green Arrow, like Mike alluded to, the origin's pretty well handled in the first issue. So even if you don't know a lot about the character, you really get a good kind of up to speed origin story, and it's just a great, kind of murder mystery. It's funny you mentioned that. Like, it literally is kind of like Knives Out in the beginning, when the will is read to them and everyone's there going through it, and yeah, it's a good twist on that. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and like I said, you get the I love Mike W. Barr's writing on the character too, because he doesn't write him exactly like Batman, where Green Arrow is doing some detective work here, but he's much more the guy to start going and knocking around heads, asking questions, instead of like going and gathering his evidence. And even has like allusions to like, what would Batman or Bruce Wayne do, since now he's come back into money and he has kind of that playboy persona again, because before this Oliver Queen had lost his fortune and then kind of regains it for a little bit. But I think Barr does a really, really great job with Oliver Queen's character here.
Yeah, I like what he did with his personality, and especially like you were saying, there's literally a line where he's like, Batman would do detective-y type stuff, but I'm not smart enough for that, so I'm just gonna find a hornet's nest and kick it. And it's exactly what he does. He just starts doing dumb shit. And like, I think that's the point where he just goes up to like all of the family members from the will and was like, yeah, I know who killed her, and just like leaves, presumably, after dropping that bomb, even though he doesn't know who killed her.
I like the fact too that like he knows he's not really the right person to run this company, and he's just like, I need to get out of this as soon as possible. And he knows, like, he fastly figures out his purpose is not to stay, but to figure out which one of the family members isn't the corrupted person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there are so many different instances where Oliver Queen's character is just nailed down perfectly by Barr, and it's just so nice to see. Like, from that torture scene that you mentioned earlier with Count Vertigo, where he just puts an apple on his head, William Tell, puts a lemon on his head, William Tell, puts a grape on his head.
Like I said, that no one's ever gotten past the grape. That's where they all give out.
Yeah, it's good. It's real good.
You still get like the kind of the everyman feel that Oliver Queen has, which is one of my favorite aspects of the character, is that when he's ever like around the Justice League, he's kind of he really is the everyman to that to that like group of characters when you got Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, like Flash hanging around, because he's like Batman. He doesn't have any powers, but he's the very liberal standing hero where he's not afraid to get in someone's face about moral standing and beliefs.
Yeah.
Not to say anyone around him is like a complete right wing person or on the team, but that's always been his character, which I've liked.
Yeah, and it shows through in here, but he is also someone that's very ready and open to admit his mistakes. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, he realizes very quickly, okay, I'm not meant to run this company because I'm very bad at it, so I won't do that. But there's even another point where he's trying to hack into the 1980s computer mainframe, and he just starts shouting at it, which is exactly what most people would do. And the secretary comes in and is like, "What's wrong?" And he just starts shouting at her, and he's like, "I'm sorry. I'm mad. This happens sometimes. This computer's a dick. I shouldn't take this out on you. Can you forgive me?"
I think it's funny how like the woman that came in there, like while he was trying to figure out the password, was just like automatically looked at that hexagon and was like, "Oh, that's a benzene ring, obviously," and just like walks out and just like.
That was a little Deus Ex Machina looking back on it.
Yeah, I'm just like,
oh, a hexagon? No, clearly that's a benzene ring.
Of course.
Idiot.
Well, to be fair, that's a person who has experience in the field at that company, so it would be like, all right, so Dan, Ginger Dan, you're in engineering. So like, if I were to walk into your office, I would be completely just dumbfounded.
True, and I would probably be very confused if I walked into yours.
Yeah, but I mean,
like Green Arrow even reasons it afterwards, like, of course, a benzene ring, something too smart for the layman and too common for the technical person.
Yeah,
obviously. Like, is it?
I do want to. It was in Dan's notes, but I do think there's one joke in it that doesn't really hit, which is the very sexist and misogynist line where he has about women staying in the kitchen. It's very much played like a joke because, like Green Arrow is the most like liberal standing character in the entire DC universe. So like, it's very funny that he says that like out of context. Like I've seen that panel shared out of context, and I was like, this. I don't think the joke really hits in the book though, just because I don't think he would ever say that.
I can see him saying it as a joke, but like not knowing his surroundings well enough to realize that it wouldn't be a good joke. Like that's one of those things where he thinks it's a good idea and then would probably soon after realize, oh, maybe that wasn't a good idea. That to me seems like what it would be, but I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily hit too well.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously also that's from '83, so I mean I think it's a different climate in today's world. Obviously, something like that probably would not even be thought about being put into a comic in 2020. I would imagine.
I don't think anything you find Marvel or DC, definitely.
Yeah, definitely not.
I can see that joke being the weird thing is like he says it when no one's around too. Like that's the other thing. Like so it's just like him talking to the reader. So it does well, not really. He's the only one in the room, but like there's not thought bubbles on it. He actually says it out loud. If it was like thought bubbles, maybe I can think like it would be funnier, but he says it out loud, which was very weird to me. But not to spend too much time on it. I just thought it was a joke that didn't hit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Need more notes on this. I know, Dan, I have some questions for you. As on the show, kind of inadvertently, we've tackled 3 different eras of Green Arrow now. We have the 1983 miniseries, which we're talking about right now. But for retro books, we've done a Kevin Smith issue, and we've actually done a John Widick issue. I know you own the Kevin Smith stuff, and I think you ended up picking up the Brad Meltzer Archer's Quest, which immediately follows that.
Yep.
And then Judd Winnick takes over after. I think there's one other person in between, though. I can never remember. But yeah, you've kind of read now. I mean, the Green Arrow, you've read that before that, kind of all in the same. It's all the same volume, but kind of different takes and voices a little bit. But same art with the art. Except, well, Phil Hester on both, but not for the one with the Judd Winnick. But thoughts on this as it compares in your opinion?
I actually really like this. For me as a comic book reader, like I do like the 80s in terms of writing and art. I think that's like my sweet spot. One of my sweet spots in terms of like what I like to read as a whole. And this series really, really does. It's a really good story, and like I said, really easy for someone who's not really familiar with the character to kind of read it. Obviously, with Kevin Smith stuff, the the Phil Hester art, obviously all that stuff kind of is also a great point to that. So I think we were talking before we came on the air here, and reading this just really made me want to push that Kevin Smith stuff and all the other Green Arrow stuff that I have up on my docket to read, because I just really like his character. I mean, obviously there's a lot of comparisons you can draw with other characters and other publishers and stuff like that, but he really has a unique voice, and like Ginger Dan explained, like a unique character that's really kind of laid the groundwork for in this story. So I would say this is definitely up there. Obviously I'll have to read the whole run to kind of make my final assumption on that, but yeah, I would say this is definitely a much better echelon of Green Arrow stuff.
I should point out too that we read the famous issue where Speedy is revealed to be doing heroin. We did that for one of our decade shows as well. So you've actually read the O'Neill and Adam stuff at least for one issue as well. I completely forgot about that for some reason though.
Yep, definitely, yeah. All different eras.
Yeah, I think by this point you've hit on the big eras now. I mean, I will say that as of right now in 2020, Green Arrow does not have an ongoing series. It wrapped up at issue 50, and I think we covered that I think that was back when we were on doing the Student Shield show and that variation. But the stuff in Rebirth I thought was really good, and it was kind of pretty good throughout the series. And it ended with him maybe hinting back to joining back up with the Justice League, as they've kind of been DC's been playing coy with whether they're gonna come back. And then like the characters had lasting impact to the point where like he just had a show on television for 5 seasons that just wrapped up. I mean, Crisis on Infinite Earths killed him off, spoilers, but I mean, yeah, it was a show for 5 seasons that might be getting a spin-off with the character's daughter now.
Wasn't it like 9 or like 8 or something?
Maybe it was 8.
It was too long.
I stopped watching it around season 5 or 6, and that was like a couple years ago when I stopped watching it.
Maybe it was another show that was in my head that's on season 5. Like, still, it ran for much longer than I thought it would run for.
Oh God, yes. I mean, even knowing that they did that, I'm still surprised that they managed to get that many episodes of Green Arrow, and I love the character.
That entire CW universe, I mean Arrowverse, whatever you want to call it, now has enough characters that they can actually field a Justice League. So keep that in mind. So in terms of lexicon, the character has definitely had popular impact, and like, everything moves and slopes up and down. That we are like where, I mean, 83, 87, we get the kind of relaunch and different take with Mike Grell. And that's also very, very good. Maybe eventually we'll tackle Longbow Hunters as a kind of comparison to that. It'd kind of be fun to do. It's a very different series. It's much more kind of realistic, grisly, and violent. But
wait, you also tackle. Hold on. I have
something out. Oh God, what is
also this? Tackle The Wonder Years.
Hey. No.
This is an ad that I kept out of a book that I put into a custom bind.
There you go.
The audio version, he's holding up a DC House ad for a 1972 Green Arrow series.
Well, it's The Wonder Year. I think it just takes place in 1972.
Oh, okay.
From what I remember, it's been a while since I've read it. It's collected at the very end of Grell's run.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's not a. I don't believe it's another origin. I think it just takes place towards the beginning of Green Arrow.
Okay.
Also, complete side quick tangent. Going back to the Green Arrow that we read for this, in that first issue, when it's going over his origin, it shows him in the leaf costume. I find it hilarious to no end that he made himself a pair of leaf gloves.
Oh yeah,
How? Why?
It's one of those great, just like kooky comic book moments that you just kind of go with that like own up to it. It's so stupid and hilarious.
It's like, sure, why not?
God, it kind of reminds me of the what was it, Tom Scioli, Green Arrow origin. It was like a page long.
Forget. I don't know what you're talking about.
So I think it's collected with Cave Carson.
Okay.
From Young Animal. I think it just appeared as backups, but he was doing like different backups of like random stuff. And one of the things was like a Green Arrow origin. And it's just one page. And it's basically just like the whole, you should look it up at some point if you can, because it's fucking hilarious. But the like punchline to it is he's like just like getting high on this island, smoking something or another. And suddenly he's like, oh shit, this island's alive. And he's like, oh no, I'm an alien, Zine Arrow. And it's like X or something. He's like, fight crime, use trick arrows. And then he's like, and then it's just like, oh yeah, they misheard me. And it's just, it's one of those things I can't explain, but it's really funny. And you should definitely look it up.
I mean, you're, to me, you're my go-to for the Young Animal guy because I haven't read a lot or hardly anything from Young Animal. So like, I definitely will probably check it out now, but
Yeah.
Focusing on the art of the series, I can't talk highly about it enough. This is a pretty much perfect art team. You have the great Dick Giordano doing the inks and finishes over Trevor Von Eeden. So, you can't really contain enough about how great Dick Giordano was for DC Comics. He's one of those people that you might put up there with like Jose Luis Garcia Lopez as that's the look of DC Comics when you think of a character. If it's got Dick Giordano's name on it, you know you're getting very, very guaranteed, genuinely good something to look at. And I think that definitely happens here. So, I mean, only reading the 4 issues of this, I completely see why he would be one of people's definitive lists of Green Arrow artists. And I know we did that definitive writers artist thing a little bit ago, and I know we chose Phil Hester as ours, but this I can kind of see a lot of some Phil Hester looks in this with kind of the more blockier, cartoony style that this has, but also still kind of it still kind of holds like a realistic depiction, kind of that harkens back to Neil Adams. So it's kind of a great amalgam of the two a little bit for me in some scenes.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Dick Giordano returns to the character, and I believe inks it partially during Grell's run, and I think takes over pencils at one point towards the end.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean the guy was known for his inks. But I think he's a great artist. If you've seen a Dick Giordano splash page or pinup, but like they're very, very good. And it's one of those DC classic names that the more you see, more you just see how important he was to the look of their comic books. And I think this plays into, it's one of those hidden gems of the 80s. And I'm becoming very much a big fan of like these early to mid 1980s comic books where I think a lot of things were lost. But like in this time, it's definitely a booming period, what you get out of the 1980s, but I think it might be arguable that this is the best period, like decade for comic books. If Vince would hear, he would argue for it to be the 90s, though.
Oh, sure. And I will say, just like somewhat quickly with things getting lost and stuff, I remember, so I read these, I have them physically just in single issues. And while I read this rather fast, I did take a quick second to read one of the letter column entries into it in maybe the 3rd issue. And it was just this guy kind of going on. I was like, so why is he just getting a miniseries? Like, people like Firestorm and Swamp Thing have graduated to having their own series. So what's wrong with Green Arrow? Like, is this just like testing the waters or what? Unfortunately, I did not feel I had the time to read the response from the editorial team, but it's an interesting thing to note, and kind of going back to how we're all kind of, maybe not all of us, but like we're a little shocked that 1983 is the first time Green Arrow has his own self-titled series after being a Golden Age character. And it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that people felt the same way then, kind of, and also that they were noticing it was like every other, Tom, Dick, and Nancy, and whatever the hell the saying is, has their own series.
It's really weird when you kind of look at it, Green Arrow and Aquaman, because they make their appearance together in the same book, I believe, and both of them go on to not have a book solely starring themselves for a long time. And what is it? What's the random piece of trivia we saw once that it takes Aquaman like what 19 or 9 or 19? I can't remember how many years where he finally appears on a cover, which is crazy.
Right, that sounds right.
So it's very weird. I mean, at this point, and because like Batman, he gets detective and his his flagship titles with his name, and then same with Superman. Wonder Woman gets a book. It's very odd, and Flash also has one. Green Lantern has one. And Flash, Green Lantern, both spinning out of Showcase. But very odd that kind of the two bigger characters that launch out of the Silver Age don't have a book. It's one of those perplexing things. But
yeah, I mean,
track this down. I would say it's definitely worth a read.
yeah, I mean, you would think that with how good this. I mean, I think this was pretty good, and to think that DC didn't see that, and I don't know if it didn't sell well or whatever, but I mean, this would have seemed like a great jumping on point to start an ongoing series, because it's kind of like a little bit of an origin story to kick off his. There's definitely room to continue his story with this miniseries.
It works really well as an introductory part. Like if you never read Green Arrow before, this works for someone who's never explored the character.
Exactly.
Yeah, if I were to speculate why this didn't immediately go into an ongoing, or at least why it took, 4 years for Grell to start writing Green Arrow Volume 2? Was that 87 that it started? 88?
I mean,
it's about 5 years.
Longbow Hunter's into it because it's really the start.
Yes.
So.
But I don't know. My possible suspicion, and this would require DC to be planning really far ahead, would be that they maybe didn't want to start an ongoing and then be like, crisis. But I don't know. Maybe it didn't sell as well as they thought it would. Maybe maybe this is actually a cult classic now, and it was terrible when it came out, but now we're reading it and like, this is great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of series like this that don't have proper collections put out with it, which is disappointing. I don't see why we can't have a Green Arrow collection with this and those 8-page backup stories that he had for years with more Trevor Von Eeden art, and then even Mike Grell did some of those stories back in the 70s as well. I mean, I said it before, but there's an entire half of Dennis O'Neil and Green Lantern, Green Arrow that's not drawn by Neil Adams that we've just never seen.
I believe a collected edition was supposed to come out for that. I don't know how its timing has been affected by things, or if even other factors.
Well, COVID-19 definitely plays a part in things getting canceled and moved around. But as we've seen kind of recently, DC's collected editions entirely are just not very hard to understand. I think the Mike Grell Green Arrow Omnibus Volume 1, I don't even know if that was coming out. I know it was solicited, and then I think might have something happened with it. But like talking about more niche characters like Jonah Hex, he was supposed to get a full omnibus of stuff, and then that got downgraded to basically a hardcover that's the size of for example, it's the size of like a Legends of the Dark Knight, Batman, or Adventures of Superman, one of those like books that singly focus on an artist, or I guess more kind of closer to that Justice League, the Wedding of the Atom, and that came out, where it's not an omnibus, but it's like one of those, very thick 500-page hardcovers. So it's definitely disappointing. And I mean, the biggest one being that we're not getting Byrne's Superman. And that's another thing from the 1980s that we're just not getting. I mean, well, we're getting it, but not in omnibus. So
yeah, no, I just looked it up, and at least on Amazon, the Green Lantern, Green Arrow from O'Neil and Grell is supposed to be released again on Amazon July 21st. So I guess it's possible early July we might still be getting this book, which would be good. And also because I want to buy this.
I mean, yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, it took us forever to get all of Mike Grell's Green Arrow, and finally we got it. It took them for years, the only thing that you could get was Longbow Hunters, and then Longbow Hunters would go out of print, and then you'd hope that it would get reprinted. And I think finally, in I think the 2010s, they reprinted Longbow Hunters, which finally they got the rest of the series, and now getting an omnibus. But what Grell's 9 volumes, 10 if you count Longbow Hunters.
Correct.
So that's definitely worth a pickup. There's no reason why this shouldn't be a great complimentary thing aside to it. I know you're doing a custom bind kind of Green Arrow companion. If you want to talk about that, Ginger Dan.
I mean, I can, because there's 2 series in there that are, to my knowledge, not collected anywhere, and then the rest of it is just annuals from the Grell era that just aren't anywhere. It starts off with this, which we've just read, and then there is a Brave and the Bold miniseries from, I want to say, the late 80s. It's, I think, written by Grell, and let me just actually grab the issues because they're sitting on my floor right now so I can actually look at everything. Be right back.
Well, while Ginger Dan grabs those, Dan, any final thoughts kind of on this series?
Looks like I got some more stuff to shop for because I am really interested now in trying to hunt down some more Green Arrow stuff now. So thank you guys for talking me into it.
So, like I said, it starts off with the Vadi and Giordano Barr Green Arrow original miniseries. Secret Origins 38 is Green Arrow and Speedy. You'll notice, oh god,
that's a great cover.
It is a fantastic cover. This is what I want to be the back cover to my custom bind whenever I get around to it. But this is written, both of these I believe are written by Grell. And then I cannot make out the signatures, but Dick Giordano inked this. From there, it goes into annuals, and this is kind of like a little funky, but so the first annual is Detective Comics #1 because it's Fables Part 1. And then, oh god, goes into Green Arrow for Part 2, and then goes into The Question for Part 3. And then, oddly enough, the other Question annual, because there were only 2, is the next one up. And then that flows basically just sticking with Green Arrow annuals up until Annual 4, I believe this is. Yeah. And of note, so all of these Green Arrow annuals are from Green Arrow Volume 2, which is the Mike Grell era of Green Arrow. However, he is only involved in, I think, 3 of them, like 3, 4, and 5 maybe, or 2, 3, and 4, something like that. The rest are more, I guess you could almost say, traditional annuals, where they're just kind of random, it's random stories. And then this is the other miniseries that, to my knowledge, is not collected anywhere. It is Brave and the Bold, and it's starring Green Arrow, The Butcher, and The Question. It's by Mike Grell, Mike Barron, and Shea Anton Pensa. This is the cover to the first issue. It's a 6-issue miniseries. And then from there, it's just Green Arrow Annual 5 through 7, which are just your standard 90s crossover annuals with Eclipso, everyone's favorite Bloodlines, and then lastly, Green Arrow Year 1, except not what you're thinking. And yeah.
So with that, I think we've definitely kind of, as we're wrapping this up here, I think there's a lot of, back issue long box diving to be had. If you want to track these down, they're definitely worth tracking down. And Ginger Dan just gave you a bunch of other options for what DC should collect for Green Arrow. And maybe if you're a big Green Arrow fan, if you haven't heard of these, check it out. Like, for example, that annuals that run through like Detective Comics, Question, and Green Arrow, like, first off, like that, I'm probably going to track that down because like that's just made for me.
Oh,
that's Batman, Question. So
yeah, I'm very much looking forward to reading those all eventually, and it makes my completionist side happy because whenever I can finally, for the love of God, track down Question, which will probably never actually happen, the annuals aren't collected in any of those trade collections, but now I have them, so hey, and it worked out.
As we get more to talking about DC's collections at this point and how they collect stuff, if they resolicit the Dennis O'Neil, Dennis Cowan question series and they put the annuals back in, I might like be tempted to upgrade, but also like I know they'll never finish it because it's so niche.
See, my thing is,
and it's DC.
Yeah.
So DC put out 6 trades that collected the entire series minus the annuals, like we've already mentioned. I have the 2 through 5. One has been like $70 or more on Amazon since I started trying to track these books down, like 4 or 5 years ago. So what I'm thinking is going to happen is they're going to start a complete collection line, and they're basically going to try and collect it in 3. And that's what they're going to do. And then I'm going to be like, well, what do I do? Because I just need the first 6 issues. I don't want the first 12. I already have 7 through 12.
What's funny is you could just print a companion of all of the annuals and then the second series that O'Neil and Cowan do, which were like prestige format books. There was only like I think
Question Quarterly, I want to say it's called.
Yeah, Quarterly.
Yeah, I have plans for that. I never find those.
Yeah. I always gotta. The thing is, if you find them, you only ever find like 1 or 2 issues, and there's always like you never find like 1 or 2. You find like 1 in 5, and be like, God damn it. Yep. But
God, I was even like looking online or something on some sale that somewhere was having. And I was like, oh, I wonder what question books they have. Issues 2 and 4, useful.
or like it's a seller that knows that they're like kind of sought after by a very, very small group of people. So like they're punched up to like $25 an issue, and you're like, yeah, I cannot justify paying that much for this quarterly book from like mid 1980s DC that's quite frankly already torn up in your in your long box here. But we're off on the tangent of long box hunting and DC's assorted problems with their collected edition departments. Any final thoughts on this other than I think it's great and you should definitely track this down? DC, please reprint this. Any other final thoughts?
No, I mean, was it Vince that recommended this for us, or was it you, Mike, or who recommended this?
It was Ginger Dan, I think, threw it out when we were talking off air last week.
I might have.
And Vince brought it up. And then we were like, because last week we were thinking, yeah, well, last week we were thinking like, all right, we did Kingdom Come. What do we want to do? We discussed like, do we want to do Marvels? No, because like it's kind of the same riff.
We had like 10 different options, and you guys were
we had like 10 to 20 different things, and it was just like, all right, fine, Green Arrow. I'll do it. And then that's how this happened. So, I mean, as we've kind of changed the show structure, because of the pandemic, it's been fun. I mean, we've done the favorite issue shows, we've done the decade shows, and then we've kind of done trade reviews or collected edition reviews, whatever you want to call this. I mean, Kingdom Come reviewed as a trade. This is 4 issues because it's never been collected. But which I can say next week it's probably going to be a format change again, or maybe something like this. I don't fully know yet. As we get more into the end of May and into June, the release schedule for new books starts to pick up more on a consistent basis. We've had new books the last couple of weeks, but spotty things of whether did this come out, will it come out, has been a little bit of an issue, and hoping to get more on that track of getting back to new books. But when we get there, we get there. But I don't think we haven't had no fun in doing these different deviations. I mean, I've had a lot of fun with it, and I think we'll put our heads together and we'll put out something else. I think we have an idea we're kicking around that I think would be a fun one to do, and then I think with maybe 2 to 3 like new releases also. So stay tuned for that. But if you guys don't have anything else, I'm good to wrap up.
No, I'm good. It's definitely something I'll start recommending to people if they ever ask me about Green Arrow, because I feel this is a pretty quick read and gives you a pretty good look at the character. And from what I remember, it's not too hard to track down in stores if you really want to.
Probably get this for $4.
Yeah.
And with that, that is the show for this week. Please like and subscribe. The audio version will be out during the weekend as always. And then, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And that's the show for this week. Thank you guys for watching, and go track down and long box hunt for Green Arrow.